Hey kids, this is Ivan again. I guess I'm making up for lost time, but here's another interesting thing I've been thinking about, and of course Lamentations of the Flame Princess brought this up, but it was something I've been messing around with, and I really kind of like some of this idea that I've come up with and I've been toying around with, and that's 0 to negative hit points and system shock and death, and what do you do about that sort of thing? In a game like basic D&D or old D&D, when you got to 0 hit points, you were dead. That was it. In something like first edition, you had the thing where negative 10 was dead for real. But if there's a kind of little known rule, you have to dig around, and if you get hit by a single blow or whatever, explosion or something, to negative 4 or less, negative 4 to negative 9, you've got to make a system shock roll. And of course there was a system shock stat based on your constitution. And if you didn't make that roll, then you died. And of course, if it got down to negative 10, of course you were dead. And you bled or whatever. Like every round, you lost another hit point. And if somebody stopped what they were doing and aided you, then you would stop bleeding to death. And in something like 3.5 and up, they have things like in Pathfinder game I was playing in. The deal is that you have to make stabilization checks, and it's based on your constitution or rolling your con or whatever. And every negative hit point you have after that, if you fail your stabilization check, then your roll gets worse or everything. And I'm not really big into stabilizing by yourself, like once you've been hurt that much. Lamentations of the Flame Princess, of course, has a different take on it, and it says if you get knocked down to like negative 3, then you're going to bleed to death. There's nothing anybody can do, and you're going to die in D10 rounds, which is kind of funny. You can say your goodbyes. And if you get knocked down to negative 4, you're just dead, dead, dead. And anything where if you get knocked down to 0 to negative 2, then you wake up in I think it's D6 hours, and you can kind of crawl around, and people can help you out of the place, and you're really kind of hurting at that point. But I just kind of want to look at what could you do for something like that that's not as cumbersome as the old system shock stat, because one of the things I noticed in putting together my own homebrew game was I don't want to have a million stats or the modifiers next to every freaking thing. I don't want to have Constitution as system shock and resurrection, survival, and all this kind of stuff. I want the character sheets to be simple. I want it to be simple for people to understand. So what do we do about something like where you get hit down to negative hit points or 0 hit points? What do you do at that point? And it occurred to me that Constitution itself is kind of built right in. You have a built-in 5% increment stat there. It's a lot more draconian than System Shock is in something like First Edition, where it starts out at 99% at 18. It never gets really, really bad, even if you have a low Constitution. But I said, the heck with that. You've already been knocked down to some serious negative hit points at this point. So I figure you can take a baseline wherever you want to. You can say it's negative 4, or you can say it's 0 hit points. And when you've been hit down to there by a single blow, you've got to make a system shock roll or shock roll. And how you do that is, whether it's 0 or negative 4, you've got to roll a d20, and you've got to roll your Constitution or lower, or you're dead, period. And so, of course, if you have an 18 Constitution, you have a 90% chance of making that. If you're an average guy with an 11 or 10 Constitution, that means you have a 55 or 50% chance of making that. So you get knocked down to whatever it is, you have a bit of a chance to survive. However, if you get knocked lower than that baseline, whether it's, let's say it's 0, so you get knocked down to negative 2, well, now you've got to add 2 to your d20 roll. So all of a sudden, the guy with the 18 Constitution doesn't have a 90% chance of surviving that single blow. He only has an 80% chance. The guy with a 10, he only has a 40% chance. And then, of course, you can do it at negative 4, whatever you want to. If you get knocked down to negative 10, you're just dead, 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 and that's the end of it. And then I'm thinking, what about actual aiding stuff? Well, in a game like Lamentations of the Flame Princess or basic D&D, the rounds are really short. They're 6 to 10 seconds. They're not the 1-minute rounds of AD&D. I didn't want somebody to be able to stabilize on their own because I don't think that's realistic. But I figured, okay, well, somebody can stop what they're doing, and put themselves in danger and try to bind your wounds and get your bleeding to stop. And thinking, well, this, why should this automatically work in such a short period of time? So I said, well, heck with that. Say you're, at, negative 1 hit points, and your buddy's going to stop what he's doing and put himself in danger. Okay, well, you've got to make that system shock roll now. And it doesn't mean you're going to die if you fail. It just means you're going to keep bleeding. So, you're the guy with a 10, Constitution, and you've got to, add 1 to that roll because it's not 0, it's negative 1. So you've got a 45% chance of your buddy being able to stop the bleeding, so, or it's a 9 in 10 chance, whatever you want to call it. And so you roll, and oh gosh, you rolled a 16, you rolled over that modified constitution. So, geez, you got to roll again. Now you're down to -2. So now you have a worse chance, like a 40% chance, or 8 in 10, and you roll 6. Hooray! Your buddy was able to stop their bleeding. In the meantime, for 2 whole rounds, this guy's pretty much helpless in the middle of the combat field. There's a good chance he might get hit too. But I kind of like that. It's in one sense, it's a little nicer than something like Lamentations or Basic D&D for sure, where you just die instantly. But it's not like so automatic like Pathfinder, where it's hard to die. And we won't even talk about 4th edition. And it's not so much like 1st edition either, where somebody automatically stabilizes you, like if they attend to you. And the system shock rolls are really easy, because I think once you get knocked down to 0 negative hit points, there's going to be a real chance that you're going to die. So this is a mechanic that I'm going to use in whatever game I put together, be it just straight Lamentations or my own homebrew game. I really kind of like it, and I think it's neat, and it's easy.